magical economy called Guyana, world's fastest growing, and so on. I don't know why anybody is enamored with this, because this hasn't come about because of some fantastic planning model or development model that we have discovered. This has come about purely that a broken, low wage, low income, low development economy suddenly struck black gold. And like in any other country, that this massive fine would have taken place, you expect a splurge, a huge jump in growth. But people behave in international institutions going crazy. 43% growth, 19%. All of this is just that. But as we well know, growth says nothing about development. Nothing about development, especially when that growth is coming from a single sector. And that sector is an enclave sector. Everyday monies that you could be using for investment and so on, for our new investment, you have to use it to go and patch roads that not last in the period. And we continue with it. Because when you partially completing the application process online and going into the passport office physically to complete the process, including paying. What is the efficient part of this new process that you're all talking about? This government, this new Ministry of Public Service and Government Efficiency is not functioning. A new online process invariably results in a passport being delivered to you without you making even an appearance at the passport office. That is what online would really mean. That could buy any number of big buses to safely transport our students and our elderly folks and our disabled. But we got to sit down with one press conference, and then jump on Facebook, and and the average man in the street, the vendor who's suffering, the cane cutter who's suffering. Look, people at Rose Hall, the cane cutters gone on strike.
To Mr. Winston Jordan, you is a great man to the Guyanese citizen. As a minister to the South America land called Guyana, so much negative, so much propaganda. The PPP are trying to tell upon you, but keep speaking the truth. The truth is always there forever. The best finance minister I ever seen in Guyana. Oh yeah, Lord, please guide and protect him each and every day. He is full of knowledge and experience and things that going on in this country, Jordan.
also got to contend with blackout. You know, it's amazing what you have to contend with in this country, because only yesterday I was reading some yet another of these analysis on this magical economy called Guyana, you know, the world's fastest growing and so on. I don't know why anybody's enamored with this, because this hasn't come about because of some fantastic model, planning model or development model that we have discovered. This has come about purely that a broken, low wage, low income, low development economy suddenly struck black gold. And like in any other country, that this massive fine would have taken place, you expect a splurge, a huge jump in growth. But people behave in international institutions going crazy. You know, 43% growth, 19%. All of this is just that. A very, very low wage economy suddenly got a massive boost as a result of oil. But as we well know, growth says nothing about development. Nothing about development, especially when that growth is coming from a single sector. And that sector is an enclave sector. So I was there, it was yesterday, long, yet in another economic transformation and so on. But if they were only to visit this country where they think there's magical growth that is taking place, the numbers in this case lie. They lie. Over the last 2 weeks, we've been experiencing not unusual for May, June weather that has resulted in temporary flooding in a number of areas. And those areas are the usual suspects. The usual suspects. There was a rebate, a respite in during the coalition's period. But you're back to square one at a time when billions of dollars are being spent. Billions of dollars allocated to the national drainage and irrigation, but yet you don't see it. Billions of dollars every day they're opening another well, massive tanks and so on. And what does it result in? The same Mabi water, the same brown water, and in many cases, the same no water. People in South here can tell you long periods of no water. And when the water comes back, it's a trickle. You got to be filling up buckets. In this big day and age in modern economy, in a place like South Rhine Belt that has been around as a community since the late 60s, we had our own well, they destroyed it, they built something else next to it, and there it is, a sentinel. Billions of dollars spent, and nothing has taken place there. Now they're telling us we're getting water from some well they dig in Cummins Lodge. We were getting up oil this morning, filling buckets in this fastest growing economy where they're spending billions of dollars in so-called new wells. Billions. And if you're getting Mabi water, it's some other kind of water. And you could broadcast that into any other sector. Look at the roads. After a little rain, look at the roads. Biscuit breaking up, falling apart. Every day, monies that you could be using for investment and so on, for our new investment, you have to use it to go and patch roads that not lasting the period. And we continue with it. But I summed it off without my usual pattern. So let me just step back and say thankful to RZ, thankful to be the land and living. Many didn't make it. And I'm happy this week that I don't have any news to report on those who I know or, internationally that we have grown up with and so on. But I want to send condolences to the relatives and friends and family of that teacher who died in that road accident, the victim of another road hug, speeding in inclement weather. And as if the rest of the drivers didn't learn, soon thereafter there was another one on the Linden-Suzdijk Highway, speeding on wet road and almost ending up the same way. His bus torn turtle, but happily no one died. But the death of every teacher diminishes the educational architecture in this country. And it's so sad because I am told that the teacher had 2 very young children, including, I understand, a very young baby. Who's going to look after those kids? Those kids going to be growing up almost their entire life without a mother. All because of a reckless, careless driver in a culture, in a minibus culture that refuses to go away. All because a government refuses to put in place a transportation policy that will ensure safe driving and the safety of commuters on the road. But as they say, people get the government they deserve, and those people without activism will not be able to be the agents of change. So there we were. It's as if nothing happened, as if that death in a speeding minibus weren't enough. It just continued as if nothing happened. The roads continued to be in the case. Last week I complained about the lights, and forgive me, I made a boo-boo about the direction. It wasn't south, it was west. Sometimes when you're on these programs and you talk, and you have to be, always thinking ahead also. And sometimes that allows you to make 1 or 2 errors. But yes, it was from the Jumbie board west going to the DSL turn. But I did get the DSL turn right. Happily, the lights have returned. The lights have returned after being out for more than 2 weeks. Can you imagine? But I have another complaint. I think the government should think about putting those cameras that they have, say, on the East Coast and on the highway, Heroes Highway. They should put 1 or 2 cameras on that Mandela Avenue stretch between Jumbie Board and DSL turn, because it's the conduit of a lot of traffic that turns into the John Fernandez area there. And very often you can see those long trailer, I don't know what you call them, trailer-like vehicles racing each other or racing down that road. None, I have seen none in my, over 2 years already trying to do a bit of exercise there. None that drives at any speed near what you may call the speed limit. They're always as if they're going to get a second load or a third load or whatever the case may be. They're always speeding. And imagine one of them trying to overtake the other. So it's time that they put those speed cameras on that Mandela stretch between the Jumbie board and the DSL turn. Otherwise, I shudder to think what is going to happen. So let's do it before my shuddering comes to reality. So what else is new? Well, as you can see, we heard what was called the good news, that we will be getting passport application going online, as they say, going online. I'm sure many waited with bated breath because of the inconvenience of getting up early and going line up. Notwithstanding the fact that the immigration remains one of the most efficient departments in this country, still you had long lines every day, Monday to Friday. So I'm sure a lot of people waited with bated breath to get where they can sit down, as they say, in the comfort of their homes and make the application. But lo and behold, what is being unfolded is a 16th century. It's a 16th century application. Because in this application process, you still have to go in to the passport office to complete the application. So what on earth is it that you're sitting down, as they say, in the comfort of your home doing? After all, when you, in the old system, you had to complete the application form, then go in there and pay, then wait to go and get your picture taken, then get a receipt and then a date for when you return to collect the passport. What is changing this time around? Because when you partially completing the application process online and going into the passport office physically to complete the process, including paying. What is the efficient part of this new process that you're all talking about? This government, this new Ministry of Public Service and Government Efficiency is not functioning. A new online process should invariably result in a passport being delivered to you without you making even an appearance at the passport office. That is what online would really mean. The technology is there. If you want guidance, send somebody to Jamaica or some neighbor. I know about Jamaica because of obvious reasons. Send somebody to Jamaica to see how the process is done, to see what is the architecture that has to be built to allow you to apply what they say online and receive your passport without going physically to the passport office. You can stay here in Guyana because it has been done, and you know I have the experience of it, seeing it being done. A Jamaican citizen in Guyana can get a new passport without having to go and pay for get the travel ticket to go to Jamaica and all this kind of thing. Right online. It's a simple 5-step, 6-step, I think, process online. And then you pay online and you determine how you want to get the passport, by DHL, by regular post, by whatever. And the passport arrives at your house without you even going there. Of course, there are exceptions. There are exceptions, and there must be exceptions. It is not available to children under 16, I think. They have to go in physically. It's not available to first-timers, obviously, because they have to have a record of your thing. But in the main, this is what an online system means. All you're all doing is boarding in the poor passport office, with this nonsense that you are talking about online. And that in any case, online stuff in Guyana has shown that there are always glitches. And people don't trust the online process. They will end up eventually right at the passport office. So I think that they have the technology here. Some people say, well, you have to go in there to take a picture. You don't have to go in there to take any picture. You can upload a picture in accordance with the dimensions that they will put on there. It happens all over the place. It even happened with the cash grant. Until you get it right, the picture was being rejected. Until you get it right. But they say now that 400-something thousand people have collected the cash grant. So 400-something thousand people must have got it right eventually. It's not hard. It's not rocket science we're dealing with. And you can't come and talk about fastest growing country where money is dripping like water. And still you're going with this ancient stuff. Get it right, government. Get it right. Scrap this foolishness about setting up time and date to go in for interview and all this kind of stuff. And get it right. Send some folks to Jamaica. Let them understand the system, how it works, the technology that is being used. And bring it right back here. And implement a modern system. A system that you've got people telling people about completing online and then go in afterwards, set a date to go in and then complete the process and go in. No. That is not efficiency. That is a load of wasting money. Then, of course, the latest brouhaha, two of them. The first one is committees. Some time back, Ashley didn't promise Amanzo in his thanks for her voting in favor of him becoming opposition leader. A foregone conclusion anyhow. But it's good to know that, notwithstanding the fact that you will become it, that others show their confidence in you. So in return for that, he promised her that he will put her on committees and so. That both the APNU and WIN identified her for the Foreign Relations Committee and some other committees. But that the Speaker invoked the standing orders, which said that allocations to committee go according to votes. But it's not votes, it's really seats. It's really seats. Percentage votes, which will really percentage seats. So in a 10 member committee, the PPP ends up getting 6 members of that committee, and the opposition gets 4. And those 4 are shared in relation again to the proportion of the seats, percentage of the seats. So in that case, then WIN gets 3, the APNU gets 1. In a 9 seats, it's 5-2-2. So in all of this, FGM, which is the other party in power, in parliament, will not appear on any committee because they don't have even the minimum requirement in terms of percentage to get a member on the committee. So when Azudin was making that promise how many long ago, the question has to be asked whether he knew this was the way how members of the committee were selected. But then, what was also don't know, and was a result of the greenness of the entire opposition, the lack of experience of the entire opposition, was that in the 2006 to 2011 parliament, where the configuration was similar but not same to the configuration today, in that parliament, you had two smaller parties that gained seats in the same manner that the FGM got their seat, through the process of left-back votes. In that parliament, the TUF had one seat occupied by Manzoor Nadir, who's today the speaker, and the Gap Roar also had a seat that was occupied by Everett Franklin. And applying the same method that the today's speaker applied, because in that parliament the speaker was Ralph Ramkaran, TUF and Roar would not have got a seat, a member on the committee. But Everett Franklin expressed a desire to be on committee. And you know what? He was accommodated. Everett Franklin was accommodated. He became a member of at least one of those committees. So there was a precedent that could have been brought up at the time when Mr. Nadir was making his ruling as a speaker. He was a member then, today he's a speaker. And he invoking what the standing orders say. As did indeed Mr. Ramkaran was doing in 2006, 2011. But notwithstanding the standing orders, both the AFC at the time and the APNU agreed and perhaps had the tacit agreement of the PPP that Mr. Franklin can, notwithstanding the fact that his party didn't qualify for membership on any of the committees, that there was no objection to him being nominated by the opposition and sitting on and occupying one of the seats of the opposition. I don't know, because it seems that the present opposition wasn't aware of this precedent and therefore didn't invoke it. I don't know that it would have made a difference, but at least it was a precedent which the speaker didn't necessarily was bound to follow, but it raised and it would have at least put the speaker on the spot if he didn't want to follow that precedent set in the parliament of a predecessor. But generally, what does this point to you? That splitting votes got consequences. And while we could make, our concessionary speech about, well, it's not about sitting on committees, it's about holding parliament accountable and holding government accountable. All those are nice, fancy stuff. Nice and conciliatory. But the burning desire was to get on the committee. And all the conciliatory speeches can't douse that burning desire. It's just like how the conciliatory speeches can't douse the disappointment of losing an election. But splitting votes got consequences. And one of the consequences is A, not winning the prize, and B, even if you get into the parliament as an opposition, and even if you are able to fight above your weight class, that ultimately not much of a difference it makes. What happened also in Parliament to the committee, it must be of concern too. All the chairmanship went to win. Those that were allocated to the opposition, win hugged all of them again. The important PAC, Public Accounts Committee, Win took that. A newbie, a greenhorn, is going to head the most important committee in the parliament, the Public Accounts Committee, the only one that, by standing order, has to go to a member of the opposition. Previous holders of that post include David Patterson, Walter Lawrence, Carl Greenidge, Winston Murray. You see the names? All those people were in parliament for at least 10 years. All of them were in parliament for at least 10 years, were therefore schooled and experienced enough to head such an important committee. In the present parliament, in the opposition, at a minimum, you have somebody like Ganesh, my Paul, experienced enough to head such a committee. But no, all the committees where the opposition is holding a chairmanship are being held by greenhorns. Isn't this whole thing a laughable situation that we found ourselves in? And you know who is just enjoying the comedy show? The government. The government is enjoying the comedy show. Those committees, many of them, were the product of the 2000 constitutional reform. They were put there, sectoral committees and so on. They were put there, meant to improve the whole governance structure of the country. Unfortunately, those committees, for the most part, don't function. I was looking, because I know I have it, for the attendance record, for the convening record, not the attendance, the convening record of the last parliament, because I did it on this program a while back, and I was looking for it. Unfortunately, I should have looked for it yesterday so that I could recall it this morning, but I was doing it even as I was being called on the phone to start the program. But what I can tell you is that none of the committees in the last parliament, in terms of convening, had a distinguished record. None. 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 In most cases, the committees either failed to meet or failed to meet for 2 or more occasions for an entire 2020 to the 2025 period. Most of the committees, that was the record. And even the Public Accounts Committee failed to meet on more than 40-something occasions, causing the then chairman, Jorman Figueroa, to express open concern at the failure. What, in this fight to get on these committees, what do you think is going to happen in this? In that last parliament, the government had a one-seat majority, one seat. And they co-opted the other seat from the opposition, from the minuscule party. They co-opted that extra seat because the opposition should have had 32 seats, 31 for the APNU plus AFC, and one for that join the party system. And the government had 33. The government quickly co-opted the members from the join the party. So the opposition was left with 31 seats. So even that slim majority, the government was able to change the rules of the committee that suggests that no committee can convene without 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of the government. No committee. And as a result of that change, the frequency with which the committees met, particularly the Public Accounts Committee, diminished significantly. So fighting to get on these committees is more a CV thing, because now I've seen Win saying, well, we are going to get the government, and if they don't, we're going to make it public, and we're going to go to the diplomatic community, and so on. Ay. You know, it's August coming up, and they say take a holiday. I intend doing that, because you don't make up, you can't make up these things. You know, you really can't make up these things. Going to the diplomatic community, that is our recourse to make a difference in a parliament. And yet, we're going to be forced to holler how the foreigners meddling in our affairs. We invite them to meddle in our affairs, and then afterwards we say how they're meddling in our affairs. 60 years after independence, when the giants of Bornholm and Jagon told us we must self-determine, and they fought the British and they fought the Americans, we have invited them not only into our house, into our bedroom and our kitchen. We have invited them to tell us how to decorate our house. And we have invited them to tell us how we must live with our children and our wives and our spouses and so on. And when things go wrong and so on, we blame them as if they keep. Yeah, so that is our method of getting the system to work, to run to the diplomatic community. I know in this situation that we are in, that these touchy and feely politicians that you got, they don't like to hear these things. Of course, some of them, the attitude is to denigrate the messenger. But they can go on the same Facebook and they will see many people who are lambasting the opposition, chastising the opposition for what they seem to be, inactivity, lack of advocacy, lack of activism, and so on. If you put up your hand, I always say, if you put up your hand to be part of the system, then you must also be part of whether the success or the failures of the system. So don't blame us who are out here. I had my fair share because I was part of the system. And we had to contend with all the criticism and so on. Few praised us. Most came with criticism, notwithstanding what we did and did on their behalf. But that is part of life. That is part of what you sign up to. So don't get in your feely, oh, blame Jordan or blame this one or blame Martian or whatever. You put up your hand and be expecting that you have what it takes to make a difference. My friend sent me this morning something where they were lambasting me on some program and so on. It doesn't matter. I tell you already in a couple of weeks' time, a month, let me see, this June now, almost done, in about 2 months almost. I'm 69. So I have to keep pounding away in hoping that while I'm still alive, I could have some fruits. So I'm not the problem. I'm not the problem. But as long as I got the breath and I do this program and whatever else, I would call it like it is. We got to stop being diplomatic. The stakes have been raised exponentially with this growth in oil receipts. And it's not only about trickling down, it's the way how it's spending. And it's the way how you're not getting any benefits from it. Any lasting benefits from it. And the diplomatic community should not become our crutch. Should not become our crutch. They're important. But you can't make them the most important. They got their own interests, and they're slowly but showing us. Their interest is not so much about governance in this country. Their interest is largely economic, and they are being handsomely rewarded for their low advocacy or their silence. Then, of course, you got the opposition leader now back on his hobby horse about getting rid of commissioners. This thing started, of course, with Claudette Singh, who, as soon after the elections, claimed that they have a new sheriff in town, and therefore the three so-called opposition commissioners were not only no longer relevant, but by some mythical thing, their seats suddenly became vacant because there was a new sheriff in town. Claudette Singh, you know, a senior judge, a former judge of the Court of Appeal. And as a result, refused to reconvene GCOM and has since refused to reconvene GCOM. But Claudette Singh is still the same person now who, in backpedaling, says Parliament got to deal with it. But wait a minute. If Parliament has to deal with it, suggesting that there's a tacit acknowledgement that the commission is permanent. Because that was the intent of the 2000 reform. Prior to that, the commission was just a commission for an election period. We went through this before. That is why you had the repeated changes of the chairman of the Elections Commission. Between Bollers, who was appointed there by the Bonham administration, after Bollers, after Hoyt got rid of Bollers, which he could have done. Since Bollers, you had Collins. He was right after Bollers, Chief Justice Harry Bollers. He was Collins, Rudy Collins. After Rudy Collins, there was Hopkinson, but he was only for the local government elections. He wasn't returned for the next elections in 1997. Those famous elections were conducted by Dudes. Y'all remember Dudes? Throw it over your shoulder. They throw it over your shoulder, man. Dudes, do not sing. After do not sing, I think you had another sing. I think it was Joe Singh. Was Joe Singh. And after Joe Singh, it was Steve Surajbali. But Steve Surajbali came post the 2000 reforms. And that is why Steve Surajbali was there until the then opposition, PPP hounded him out of office. Y'all want activism? Then go and take pages out of the PPP book. Because even when they're in opposition, they look like they're in government. So that poor Surajbali, he said, okay, I gone. Surajbali was not removed. Surajbali resigned. Surajbali resigned because the commission had become permanent after the 2000 reforms. Even Norton said he advised them against it, but they still went ahead. Ralph Ramkoran, in one of his conversation 3 pieces, dealt with this matter. And he said, it is Parliament that got to fix it. If you want the commission to go back to not being permanent, Parliament got to fix it. And they're going to have to get 2/3 majority to do it because it's a constitutional amendment that caused it. What's so hard about it? What is so hard about it? And Anil, sometime this year, tell them to go to court. He told the warring factions, you all go to court and solve it there. So he not even buying the fact that you know, let us come to Parliament and change it. 2/3. But you see, it's not easy just to go to Parliament, just to change something like that. Because the will of the people that caused the constitutional reforms in 2000 don't just suddenly, disappear. And every time you want something, you just go and change the piece. You have a whole constitutional reform commission that has literally come to a standstill. Partly because the composition has to change, because that is how the Constitutional Reform Commission bill and act said. It's the parties in the parliament. So yes, that has to change. The composition of it has to change. Nigel Hughes resigned immediately from the commission. But until that whole process has gone through again, what is this big show about naming commissioners and writing Claudette Singh? What or not Claudette Singh can do if you name commissioners? Claudette Singh can't recognize any commissioner at that commission that ain't got an instrument signed by the president. You don't just nominate commissioners and then they suddenly appear at GCOM. They have to be sworn in by a president, and you got to give them the piece of paper that will carry this. So now you're writing Claudette Singh and you're writing president. What do you know what you're writing Claudette Singh for? And what you're writing president for? Because his AG already tell you, go to court. He has already been advised that he ain't signing anything because he AG, who is the advisor to the president. The president's legal advisor tell y'all already, go to court. But your mama going and trying to raise feelings in public and all kind of stuff. It's not a moral issue. It's a constitutional issue. It's a constitutional issue. And as to whether the constitution is to be changed just purely for this aspect is another matter. Because you got many other aspects of the constitution that got to be changed. But all of those we thought will be changed in the context of constitutional reform. The opposition, the intent was for the GCOM to be an independent constitutional agency that, notwithstanding your being elected or selected as commissioners by the government and the opposition, that once that process has been completed and you come to the commission as commissioners, not opposition commissioners and not government commissioners. It's unfortunate that is how it has evolved for the most part. For the most part, that is how it has evolved. But there have been instances when it has not been so. Vincent Alexander will tell you that he never thought of himself as an opposition commissioner. Never. And that run him into trouble on numerous occasions, to such an extent that he reminded us or told us or disclosed to us that at one time the then opposition leader Robert Corbyn attempted to remove him, and he reminded Robert that he could not do so. Robert is a lawyer. He must have studied the Constitution, he must have studied amendments and decided Vincent got a case, I ain't wasting money in court. Robert Williams, former PNC minister, former chairman of Guyana Fisheries, a stalwart PNC, good, known for his dominoes and all kind of story eating, fell out with the PNC. He was nominated, I believe, by the TUF to replace someone who had died, or was, yeah, I think the person had died. Robert Williams became a commissioner. And I met Robert at DCC one afternoon. And I said, man, Robert, how come you keep voting, on a number of instances you're voting with siding with the government? Why? Because you're no longer a PNC member, or you hate the PNC to such an extent? You've been in the PNC for a long while. You were stalwart in the PNC. Why are you doing this? Robert told me, he said, listen, friend, I am not an opposition commissioner. I do what is right for the commission. He said, yes, the opposition nominated me. Yes. And by the way, the opposition leader would have had to send his name to the president as the commissioner to replace the one who had died, I think. So Robert, even though he was iffy with the PNC and so on, I think he was nominated by the TUF or so on, his name was still sent to thing. But Robert then said to me that he is not an opposition commissioner. He's a member of GCOM. That's what he said. That is what the 2000 reforms really wanted. That yes, you are there, but there's no such thing as representing the opposition interests and the government interests. It is representing the interests and the promotion of the people at GCOM. But as I said, it's unfortunate it never developed like that. And it just reverted to the old system. And that is why the whole thing has to change again. You have to remove this whole concept of opposition and government. I don't know that it could happen in such a racially divided, racially charged society. But if we were able to pick 7 people of impeccable quality, integrity, disposition on that commission, it would be the best for us, because we won't hear any more about this government commissioner and this opposition commissioner and all this kind of story. But it's to find that 7 in this population of 800,000 is still a big problem. It's still a big problem. And to find a 7 who will be beyond suspicion and who can be trusted to put the nation first, I still maintain is a very grave task. I still maintain that. It's a very grave task. But this showdown is going to come because no local government elections, there can't be any local government elections for this year because the commission has not met. There's a large backlog of work and so on, and I'm not too sure where the chairman of the elections commission is going to carry this. I'm not too sure. There is a commission, and until a court pronounces on the 3 so-called opposition commissioners, the commission has to continue its work. The commission has to continue its work. It can't continue in the comatose state as it is in at the moment. A state in which it seems, and that seems to be the case of a lot of these institutions, they are in this comatose state. But while they are sleeping, they are being paid. They are being paid to sleep. The chairman of the commission easily gets about $3 million plus a month in salary and perks. At least $3 million plus in salary and perks. Could be more, but let us use the figure 3. The commissioners are being paid. I'm not sure what is the state of the 3 commissioners that the chairman deems not to be commissioners. I don't know if they're still getting paid. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out sooner or later, or one of them could text and see whether they're still being paid. But a comatose commission, the people are being paid to do nothing. The Constitutional Reform Commission, the members who remain, the chairman and the members who remain are being paid every month for doing nothing. And a number of the other constitutional commissions, they are being paid for doing little to nothing. Billions of dollars are being wasted. Over to you, Ministry of Public Service, Government Efficiency, and so on. Look at these things. Look at these things. Ashley has just named 3 lawyers. His 3 lawyers who have been defending him mightily and successfully so far. He has named them as commissioners, as his commissioners. And they're 3 pretty good lawyers. Haven't they advised him? Or can they advise him, listen, to break this deadlock, let me go to court and get a judicial review or whatever they call it on this matter? Had they done so, say in January, or as soon as he became opposition leader, when he first made the play about telling people they must resign and so on, we would have been about 6 months into the thing. And if they asked for accelerated hearing and so on, we would have been well into this and get a response and get the work going. Why is he hopscotching all around going to court? This matter will not be solved by moralizing, by emotion. and so on. The court is the final arbiter on these matters. Go to the court, file an action for judicial review or hearing or whatever you always call it, and let's get the show going and stop all this mamagaing and PR nonsense and got the people suffering and so on, and people drawing money for doing nothing. What else we had? Last week, we raised a number of points. And once again, I have to thank those who sent their messages. And the thing is now more and more people are asking me to cover more and more topics. There's so much to cover. I can't do it all. But last week we spoke about the President's Benefit Bill. And I have to recognize the effort of people like Annette Ferguson, who has done a lot, as much as you, Kadaki, in terms of pushing this here. I've seen one-off on it from GHK Lal, Peeping Tom. I think, well, of course, Ghana started out early and so on. But as we continue to see, what we're not seeing is that acceleration in outrage, in anger at this bill. And the PPP is playing it well. They're not about to convene Parliament again unless it's absolutely necessary. After June is finished, they only have 5 more weeks before Parliament goes into recess. During that period, I'm sure they're going to convene a Parliament to make certain that they get the 55 billion supplementary that they are seeking. I don't know if they will bring the bill, but they are hoping by the time they convene Parliament, any anger or so on over the bill will die away. And they could quickly rush in the bill, get it passed in one night, and that's the end of everything else. It will be yet again a bill passed as a result of the inactivity. I don't hear anything from WIN, the so-called opposition, on this bill. I don't see the outrage by WIN on this bill. Maybe they're still hoping that their leader will become president and inherit these things, even though he don't need it. And for the most part, APNU seems to be waiting to make their play in Parliament, because outside of Ganesh, I think Dexter Todd might have done something on his new program. Kudos on your new program, Rising something, I can't remember, and so on. But I don't know, sometimes, you think that your effort really is, you think your effort is not really making it. And sometimes you say your piece and you move on, because that is what it seems to be. People are not outraged by a bill that will give 4 ex presidents. Well, who you have now? You have Jagdeo, you have Sam Hines, Ramatar, and Granger. 4 ex presidents. Benefits, and pension that could bill hundreds of houses, if not thousands, that could buy any number of big buses to safely transport our students and our elderly folks and our disabled, that could squeeze in an extra meal for those who going home in the afternoon hungry, even as they get something to fill their stomachs in the morning. That could do so much. Already, as we said, they aren't paupers. They aren't, perhaps the only pauperish person might have been Granger. But generally, they aren't paupers. A monthly pension that gets anywhere between 2.5 and 2.8 million a month, which they don't have to spend in any great manner because other things are taken care of. We poor people, and me, pensioner, have to worry how you're going to make an NIS pension after serving so long. An NIS pension of 100 and how much is it now? 113,000 or something like that I get for NIS pension. How you going to get that to make it work? And by all my diabetic, God bless some of my friends who get me some of the diabetic medicine that I need. And the doctor bills for all the arthritic pains that I get. We don't have that luxury. We are humans too. But they get medical, they get free water, they get free light, they get free this, they get free that. And on top of all of that, if they go and work, they ain't paying no tax. They ain't paying no tax when they was president, and they ain't want to pay no tax after they become president. Now you tell me how you can convince 7/8 of the population who paying these taxes that they must pay for people who got the capacity and wherewithal to pay tax. This doesn't outrage our population. Perhaps the reason why they're not outraged is because they're not educated about the reality of the bill. And no press conference go make them educated. Had this been the PPP in opposition opposing this bill, you know what they would have done? They would have got their people in all the different communities. They would have had their people every day picketing the Ministry of Finance, picketing the RFC president and other places. They would have had posters all over Guyana. They would have made monsters out of us. And the people's conscience would have rise up. Not only them, the likes of the TGs and the human rights and all them like they did for Hamilton Green bill. Them would have joined the story too. Them would have joined the story. So what is wrong with this present opposition? And they get vexed when you call them out. Them believe you could sit down at a press conference and read a long thing. You fall asleep by time to finish. Or get on the Facebook and think outrage. But the PPP would have got boots on the ground in the communities, informing the ordinary person in the ordinary language. Them buy one for tech. Them buy one for tech. Them one for tech. 200%. Them want to take $1 million more from you. They would have been there talking the language of those people and get them riled up. But we got to sit down at one press conference, and then jump on Facebook, and and the average man in the street, the vendor who's suffering, the cane cutter who's suffering. Look, people at Rose Hall, the cane cutters gone on strike at Rose Hall for back pay and for some other thing. The people who meet me just yesterday, I went to get my life certificate signed. And I met a wonderful lady there. Little baby in her, nursing, and so. And we had a small conversation, and she said, you know, sorry, I know you. Yes, I know you were a minister. And she said, I'm an economist too. And I think she said, but I'm so frustrated in this country. I'm frustrated. I don't know where to turn. Clearly, she obviously got a degree in economics, so I can't find a job, and so on. She got a youngster, and I think nursing youngster, and so on. How do you tell those people that they got to continue in that situation when these people who get already getting millions want to get more by bringing bill? And I call all of them because none of them have come out and said, listen, we got enough, we don't want this bill. None. So you have to assume all of them want the bill. How do you tell the people who don't know where the next meal is coming from because they had one 3 days ago? How do you tell them? How do you educate them? We always complain that how the people they didn't vote for APNU because this and that. They didn't vote for APNU because APNU didn't succeed in educating them. Didn't succeed in educating them. And I said, if yours ain't working, then pay attention to what your enemy used to do. Because them own was successful. They were in opposition and they were a thorn in the backside of the coalition. How did they do it? It is y'all who they're in there. Got to study it. Study it. And make it make sense. And it discussed a certain thing with me, but I told her, we had a conversation, I told her I had to think. But there's a woman with ideas, but she's not on the front line. She's being sidelined, but still working. Still working. Because why? She got both principle and party over personality. And many of them who got personality, them running and trying to convince you, well, oh, I don't like Norton. Norton this and Norton though, maybe he is. But many people, as loved as he was, didn't like Burnham too. But what they loved was the party and the party's philosophy. They loved that. Norton knows the excuse for them running and crossing over and so on, or not working as hard as now they're forced to work now that they've crossed over. And then, of course, the Guyana Development Bank has come in as a mighty savior, as the new topic in tongue. Masking now discussions on the bill, the benefits bill. So the new topic in tongue is the Guyana Development Bank. We had started this discussion last week. I debunked some of the nonsense that appeared by people I call educated. I gave that brief history again about Guyana Cooperative Mortgage Finance Bank, Guy Bank, Small Industries Corporation, CDC, right? All of them we came through. And it was interesting because the girl who I met yesterday when I was about to sign said she listened to me. She listened to that program. She said she don't know how it came up and things. She listened to it. And she was surprised at what she was hearing. So I am so happy. A lot of people didn't even know or weren't aware of Guy Bank. Again, it's about education. Y'all don't come and holler how Jordan you went there or Jordan you the one. You are the ones who are the MPs. You are the ones who are the party people and so on. I doing me peace what I can do. But ultimately, if you want to perform in Parliament, you have to do the research. I have never torn down any one of y'all who have asked me for help. But ultimately, your greatest tool in Parliament is your research, your ability to counter, your ability to anticipate what they will bring. But you have to do the hard work. You have to do the hard work. You have to be able to assemble a large amount of material. You have to know where you can turn quickly to find this material and so on. Terence called me the day of the funeral of Clinton. I had a long discussion on these matters. I was able to guide him, explain, clarify, and everything else. He reaches out all the time. Nobody expects everybody to have been there in 1960 and 1940 and 1920 and all this kind of thing. But that is why it's called history, and for which you got to go and do the research. If you really want to make a difference in notwithstanding your numbers, if you want to get above the noise, if you want to make use of the 15 minutes that they allocated to you while the greenhorns taking the 30-minute slots. So we got this Guyana Development Bank. This thing where I call, when you look at the legislation, you realize they have labored mightily to produce a mouse, because that is what is the legislation. There's so much that's absent and so on. I am again going to praise Dr. Dexter Todd on his program Rising Something. He had a very spirited discussions with Campbell and Director of Finance. I think it was on Tuesday. They had a part one, I think, and there's a part two and so on. And they had a lot of spirited discussions and so on. There's a lot of discussions that have taken place also in Kaito News, Pippin Tom, GHK Lal, a whole set of things. So there are a lot of matters out there. I have added my piece last week and I will continue this week adding a bit more. But I will start out by again saying that what they're looking at as the objectives of Development Bank, not only were there a history in terms of Guy Bank and the Mortgage Finance Bank and so on, GNCB Trust and so forth, but even as those institutions were shut down, micro and small enterprise initiatives were still being engaged in largely by the government. But there were also institutions like DFL SA out of Trinidad. They had come here. I think they had an office somewhere by where Tribe is at the moment, or somewhere close to where Tribe is. DFL SA. It didn't last too long. A couple of years. It didn't last too long. And then I think people like Kosher Bank had an initiative. Demerara Bank, for example, has been given monies from IDB Invest to assist local businesses, and that's most recent. That's most recent. Then you have the IDB Lab, which is to assist small and micro businesses that has not been tapped into by most, if not all, of these small businesses. And I know, for example, Human Services had their micro windows for women. So you had all of these little initiatives. But under the PNC, let me go with the PNC, the coalition government, because that is what I supposed to be. Because very often people say you don't do nothing and all this kind of story. As I said, the coalition government, one of the first things it did was to initiate a study to bring back Guy Bank, or a variant of Guy Bank. Let us say to bring back a variant of Guy Bank. We went to the Caribbean Development Bank, we got assistance, and they sent us a consultant, and he did the study. And one of the results, generally the results of the study was that, look, there was a lot of liquidity swirling in the economy. It's a question of harnessing that liquidity and then channeling it into the right direction. But that they didn't feel a need to bring back a Guy Bank in its construct. That we could have gone for a window, mobilized capital, and gone for a window at one of these institutions, or set up your own little small institution, but he was trying to avoid the admin costs and so on, and we could continue, and maybe just like a small industries corporation back in that manner or so on, right? But even as we had financial constraint at the budget level, over the period 2015 when we came in, because I remember 2015 when we came in the first budget, we implemented a new novel program called SLED, Sustainable Livelihoods and Entrepreneurial Development Program. The intention of that program was to assist micro and small. We don't looking too much about medium because we didn't have the money. Micro and small businesses to start up or to grow existing small businesses, to create that value added and the necessary employment. People laugh at me and say, oh, governments say how they're not responsible for creating jobs, and then say how that is that in response to that, it means then that we help supporters. That's what they say on the one hand, On the other hand, they say how because their policies, most black people, y'all give most black people the intention that they can only get work in the public service. And as a result of that, it imprisons them into poverty. But which one is it? Which one is it? The PPP make a joke about planting chip that President Granger had talked about as one of the small business initiatives. The PPP scoffed and laughed inwardly, realizing that it got, just like the Polari, just like the Barra, just like the Channel, it got potential, but they are not going to allow any PNC government, any coalition government, to make that a success. So they went to town on it. And you know what? Nigga, people like us who join and laugh. Planting chip, man. Planting chip economy. They did the same thing with rice flour. But we got those gullible ones. They don't even want their own to succeed. They're quick to join the bandwagon. I'm going to read your comment just now by a certain man to show you. But anyway, in that first year, we set aside $125 million for this new program called SLED, Sustainable Livelihood and Entrepreneurial Development. But like in everything in life, there are those who can take a good thing and a good idea and make it into nothing. The devil always is in the details as it is in the implementation. That SLED program could have been the ticket for many out of poverty had it been implemented in the manner that it should have. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Over the period 2015 to 2019, we would have set aside nearly $700 million for that program at a time when our budgets were very small. But yet you hear we didn't do anything. I didn't look after our supporters. You know how much $7 million cut up right and so on in terms of what the objective of the program was could have done? Huh? You know what that could have done? Implemented correctly? The PPP recognized the value of the program. They recognized the value of the program. And when they came in 2020, imagine the budget was in September of 2020, I think it was, right? Yes, the budget was approved in September the 26th, 2020. And in that budget, they had $105 million for that same SLED program. In 2021, when COVID was rampant, they didn't budget anything for it. But by 2022, they had switched the program's name from SLED because they don't want anything to do with the coalition. If they can do without it. So they switched. They no longer budgeted monies on the SLED. They switched it under a new euphemistic name called Rural Enterprise Development. Rural Enterprise Development. And you know why it's the same? Because the legend said to finance small and medium businesses, initiatives. So they switched from SLED to Rural Enterprise Development. Okay? Now, the best we could have done in our year was in 2019 when we set aside $250 million. But when they switched in 2022, you know how much money they put? $2 billion onto this program. $2 billion onto this program. $2 billion. 2023, $500 million. 2024, $640 million. 2025, $650 million. And 2026, $600 million. You see, but by then, these monies were going down, while other slush funds were climbing. Slush funds such as the Men on Mission Fund. Slush funds such as the Small Business Fund. We had a Small Business Fund. And the best we could have done is up it to $100 million in 2018, I think, and 2019. In that small space of time when the government came in after the budget passed in September 26, for 2020, they budgeted $100 million under the Small Business Fund. $250 million in 2021. $300 million in 2022. 300 million in 2023, 450 million in 2024, 600 million in 2025, and 1,050,000,000 in 2026. So between 2020 and 2026, the government would have spent on small business initiatives derived from the small business fund $3,050,000,000. Okay? Under the coalition government, we reactivated Linden Enterprise Network. Again, lending monies at little interest rates, very little interest rates for small business initiatives. By the way, the SLED fund was 0%. Not only 0%, but they were grant funds. Grant funds. Small business fund, 0 to 1% or 2%. All the other initiatives I talked about, 0 interest. They were literally grant funds. LEM was small interest. We reactivated that fund after it was shut down by the previous administration. And you know what? LEM has since been shut down again after we left. Then there is something called the Amerindian Fund. Amerindian Development Fund, which separately has billions of dollars being disbursed. I think this year alone, $4 billion is set aside in the Amerindian Development Fund for all those small business initiatives. In addition, there's the low carbon development strategy, 15%, that is set aside for Amerindian development. So the point I'm making is that there are billions of dollars that have been set aside prior to the initiation of this bank for micro, small, and medium businesses. And the question is, where are these businesses? Where are these businesses? How have they contributed to value added, employment, exports, income, revitalization of rural economies? Where is the study on them? But we're running and saying how we're setting up a Guyana Development Bank. What is the premise on which we are doing this? We are saying that we can make money available for people who got ideas. But we have been making billions of dollars in grant funding for the last 10 years at least. $15 years even, or even more, for this very idea. Yet it would appear that we don't know what we have accomplished with this level of spending. We appear not to know. Listen to what Jorman Figueroa, in a letter to the editor, Kaito News, June the 15th, 2026. Here's an extract of what he said. Sometimes it gets you, but here's an extract of what he says. He says, for decades, he's saying, access to financing has been one of the greatest barriers preventing many Guyanese from turning business ideas into successful enterprises. And then he's saying that the SME Development Bank, which is this new bank, has the potential to change that reality. No, you see, if you add the history, for which Jorman knows about Guy Bank, he knows about Cooperative Maritime Bank. Jorman knows about all those initiatives I told you about. Not only does Jorman knows about these initiatives. But in the case of the SLED program, he had to sue Chronicle for libeling him in relation to this program. He knew what the program was all about. You know why? Because in the same letter he comes back and he says, he, Jermaine, sees the bank helping individuals to establish, here this array of things that he's put here: poultry farms, agro-processing facilities, construction companies, block making operations, hardware stores, laundry and commercial cleaning services, transportation services, car and truck wash bay services, eco lodges, restaurants, technology firms, digital marketing agencies, and so on. What's new about what Jermaine has said here? What's new? Because when he had to sue Chronicle for libeling him, was over a poultry project, a pig rearing project, sorry. A pig rearing project. The identical thing he talks about here, poultry farms and pig rearing. So what is new that this bank will be doing that wasn't done before, or whose intention was to that? The billions of dollars that have been made available to the society. Now, if it is now being claimed that these billions of dollars were not disbursed correctly or didn't go in the intended things, because, I mean, look, you all know Christopher Jones. That's a well-liked guy. I love the guy. Christopher was trying to help out some communities here in the Tocqueville South area, help them with barbering and so on. Bring, not only just barbering, but you know, those guys got these nice fancy technology where they do the hair different and so on. He was trying to help them out and so on. And then look what he went through in 2020 when the goon squad went black out the whole area just to ting the man and so. It came from the SLED program. It came from the SLED program. So when I read letters like Jermaine and so on, that seem to give the impression, you see, because here is this another quote from him. Special recognition must be given to President Ali for his administration's vision and leadership in advancing initiatives such as the SME Development Bank. While many have spoken over the years about empowering citizens through entrepreneurship and expanding access to financing, his, meaning Ali's administration, is taking concrete steps to transform those aspirations into reality. End of quote. My brother Jermaine, what is different to what the Granger government was doing? What was different than what the Forbes Barnum government did with Guy Bank and all these different things? What is different? What is different? ISED, the forerunner to IPED, was set up under Desmond Hoyt's government. Institute of Small Enterprise Development was set up under Desmond Hoyt's government. It subsequently changed its name to IPED within a year or two afterwards. And it's still in existence with a solid track record of lending to small and medium-sized businesses. What when you read letters like this, and look, as I said, everybody got a right to whatever hopscotch, skip and jump they wish to do. But our body, none of we ain't got a heart, we ain't got a conviction. When you're hopping over, aren't you hopping over because a conviction that you got is no longer being seen in wherever you're there, and therefore you're going to go over the other side? But when you reach over there now, you behave as if history is now starting. History is now starting over there. And you ain't the only one. There's so many of y'all. So many people I used to call friends. So many people I thought I understood what they stood for. When I read things like these, I said to myself, the only person you should put your faith and your trust in is God. Because look at this here. Since 1966, if Jermaine and all the others go and do their homework, they will see Bonham from day one, post 1966, talking about transforming the small man into a real man, making him economic thing, working through the cooperatives and all these things, and setting up institutions to make this a reality. Now you come in and hollering, but special recognition must be given to President Ali for vision and leadership in advancing initiatives such as this SME Development Bank. Did we have an SME Development Bank before? Didn't we have initiatives outside of the SME Bank like what I just called? When we came in 2015, the PPP had them poor Amerindian people running, doing nothing, paying them for doing nothing other than the PPP work. We shut that program down. Then a new program came in where we were going to train those people. And for the training, we were going to give them a stipend during their training. And at the end of their training, we were going to give them a lump sum to help them start their business. Many of them then got access to the SLED program. If you go online, you will see how many of them praising this SLED program for them starting different kinds of business. As a result of the program initiated for the Amerindians, plus their access to the SLED program. And I hope that the new SME Bank ain't gonna be financing any trucking service as heating here and hardware store. That's not what our SME Bank is meant to do. Finance hardware store and trucking service. SME Bank must be able to fill a void or a gap that commercial banks refuse to because the risk is too high or the returns are too low. If you want to establish a hardware store, go to the commercial bank. But if this is his idea of what the bank is going to finance, then Lord help all of us. And Lord help the taxpayers' money. But moving on, let's come to the bank. Let's look at the bank itself. And I'm not going to necessarily go through all them different things. Like I said, a lot of people have done a lot of quality work in terms of their observation, comments, criticism of the bank, and so on. The bank, as a former body director and Minister of Finance, the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Finance are the ones who are responsible for policy, administration, oversight, and so on of financial, quasi-financial, and other institutions. Whenever the government is to make a transfer, is to increase or to start the capital of a new financial or quasi-finance institution, it always appears in the Ministry of Finance books under the Ministry of Finance agency. You could go there and you will see, if it's a loan, you will see loan to public enterprise or loan to public corporation or loan to wherever bank it is. If it's a capital, you will see capital contribution to whatever, Guy Bank, GNC, the IMF, the IDB, and so on. So I went there to look for the $20 billion that is supposedly set aside in the 2026 budget for the establishment of this bank. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it. But when I started to browse the estimates to find the amount of money that was given to the small development fund, the Small Enterprise Development Fund, Small Business Fund that it was called, I saw a figure there under the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Trade, Tourism and Industry. I saw a figure there of $21 billion and $50 million. And the legend says to support small business initiatives. Asking around, I found out that is where the $20 billion is. That the $20 billion is there, and the $1 billion and $50 million is for the actual small business fund. No. How can this be? How can this be? The law provides that the Minister of Finance, quite rightly, is in charge of this bank here. And he naming all directors and so on. We can come to that. But the capital establishing the bank is under the Ministry of Trade. Y'all make them make sense. Make that make sense. And I think it's a violation of all international accounting for financial institution structuring, and it might also be a violation of the statistical. But in any case, how can one Minister of Trade have the $20 billion while the Minister of Finance is responsible for the institution and so on, ain't got control of the money? But people get a government they deserve. And here's a fundamental question anyhow. Like I showed you, billions of dollars are being budgeted every year when there's no bank in place for small business initiatives. They're all over the place. When you check the estimates, they're all over. You have these small business initiatives. Chump change here, chump change, they're all over the place. All over the place. There's even a president's purse of 300 million. In our day, it was 100 million that Granger. And these are initiatives where, as the president goes on his jaunts around the country and so on, and he sees thing, he may say, well, okay, that pepper sauce lady, you need a little cover for the bottles and so on. Listen, talk to my person, and you do the little project thing quick, and they will get the money out of this. This is called the president's privy purse. It was 100 million when, as I said, Granger was there. Now I checked there, and it's now 300 million. It's now three. So, like I said, they're small. Now that the development bank is going to be established, what are these initiatives going to continue outside of the framework of the development bank? Are they going to continue? What would be the justification for all of these? When they add up to billions of dollars. Initiative all over the budget, continuing now that you got a Guyana Development Bank. So food for thought. And I know our good friends are listening to this program and so on. Jot them points down to ask in Parliament. how those will be dealt with. Because I would think the $20 billion now should subsume all of those little things and now put into the bank. Now, this is half of the year already. Half of the year. It is clear that by the time this bank gets established legally, you will require some time for staff to be put in place. Okay, and by the way, I saw a structure put out. We probably deal with that. I was asking my good friend to take a look at it, and he says he was going to get something out by last weekend, but I didn't see it. I'm going to tickle him again because I don't want to preempt him. I want him to do it. He got experience in that. Saw the structure, and this structure, anyway, it's clear that it's going to take a while to put it that. So, in the 2026 budget, you have budgeted for $20 billion. Are you going to release $20 billion before the end of the year to this bank? And when you do, what do you expect the bank to do with it? The bank then go and puts this $20 billion, which is costing the government zero interest at the moment, because in any case, since the government has a huge deficit on its budget, it is more than likely that it has to go and borrow this money via treasury bills. So you then go and borrow this money via treasury bills and you transfer it to the bank. What does the bank do with this money? You think they put it in a non-interest bearing account? No. They then take that money to a commercial bank and put it into an interest-bearing account. In any case, even if they don't do that, you can lend $20 billion in 2 months to small business initiatives. So you got $20 billion now. You plunge into the system. $20 billion, and then what? You then have to go and mop it up right back by your 180-day treasury bills. What kind of foolishness is this? Yeah? I mean, what kind of financial behavior is this? When you're setting up the bank, all you need is a small change capital to establish the bank and to assist the bank in setting up its structures. When that gets going, you release another set of money that they could lend during that year. And that will allow them to cover expenses. And you do that all the time, until the 40 billion from the government is transferred to the bank. Now I know y'all gonna cuss me out for giving them this advice and so on. But like I said, in a couple of weeks, I'm 69. I ain't got no more interest. I never had actually in this kind of thing, knowledge, keeping knowledge tight and all this kind of story. I've always been free in my advice, in giving out advice, in giving knowledge and so on, because that is what education was meant to do. And I don't want to see $40 billion go to waste, as the suggested legislation is implying. So they may wish to rethink whether they are going to release all of that money. In the first place, it should be removed from the Ministry of Trade and captured under the Ministry of Finance, and maybe they need to adjust the supplementary paper to do just that. Because the money is incorrectly placed. Because if that money remains there, then it is the Minister of Trade the accounting officer for the Ministry of Trade who will be responsible for the use and accounting for that money, which was clearly an anomaly. Then, there are all kinds of things that is said about this bank. The bank charging zero interest rate. What does that mean then? It means then that the bank will be eating its capital to finance its administration expenses. But that is what Ali and his people are saying, that the bank is charging zero interest rate. But then the law says the bank may or may not charge interest. Make them two make sense. Make them two make sense. And therein lies a huge problem. May or may not charge interest. What then are the criteria which should be spelled out? Not in no credit policy, must be spelled out in law. What would be the criteria for determining whether a loan attracts a zero interest or interest? And it is clear that even when the bank is charging interest, there is no upper limit of interest to be charged. What defines this as a development bank? What makes this institution stand out as a development bank? And by the way, a lot is being said about credit policies and so on. This law, which putting this bank outside of the framework of the Financial Institutions Act. By the way, we are using the term bank loosely, okay? We did it with Guy Bank, we did it with Mortgage Finance Bank, and so on. And again, we're using the term loosely. But regardless, they have defined what is the bank in the law, in this law. But notwithstanding, it has to come under the Financial Institutions Act. But they have kept it outside that framework. But in the past, lest they say, well, the PNC had it so also. Guy Bank came under the Public Corporations Act because Guy Bank itself was set up by an order under the Public Corporations Act. This new Guyana Development Bank is outside of the Companies Act and it's outside of the Financial Institutions Act. So what is governing this bank? It has to be the legislation, and therefore the legislation has to be expansive, not restrictive. Everything has to be spelled out in its legislation because that seems to be the only thing that is going to be governing this bank. And there's a lot to be spelled out. In this legislation should be the last part that should be saying that the minister may make regulations for the orderly development and operation of the bank. And that will allow the minister now to put into regulations all the credit policies and the financial policies and the debt policies and whatever else, those becoming part of the bank financial architecture in law, because regulations are also legally defined. Credit policies, they are just that. But if they are in regulations and they want to change those, they have to come back to Parliament to change it. They don't need to come back to Parliament to change credit policies. We have to be careful of all this story here. And the way I said, I don't want to talk about the structure. But when the credit people are going to be reporting directly to the board of the bank, unheard of. But that is what the structure says. The credit people are going to be bypassing the CEO and go straight to the board. Make that make sense. But look, as usual, my time run out. I didn't realize I should get a cue when I start getting hoarse. But more to be said on this. In fact, we will be saying a lot about this. Next week, I will go dive straight into this and talk about the supplementary, because there's a lot to say about the supplementary. Quite a lot to say. You'll be interested. But that's all for this week.